Welcome, everyone, to the December session of Dr. Spotfire. My name's Neil Kanungo, and I'm your host. Really excited today. We have a session on advancing into analytics. We're going to be talking about the culture shifts that you face as an analyst in your organization, how you can upskill yourself, how you can upskill your peers and your teams to really bring analytics into a practical working process for your organization, whatever your organization might be. So with that, let me start with a couple intro slides. We have our motto we like to start off with is learning is not driven by answers, but by questions. And we encourage your questions today as we talk with George Mount of Advanced Analytics. George Mount has this excellent book we're going to be discussing on different analytics processes, going from Excel to R to Python. And any questions you have on, challenges you might be facing growing analytics in your organization, please include those in the chat and we'll bring those on the screen and answer those as they come in. Just a reminder, we have our Spotfire YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe to get the recorded sessions as well as our weekly quick tips. You can see the link right there on your screen. This session will be on LinkedIn, Twitter, and on YouTube for posterity if you want to come back and refer to it or send it to others that you might think this session is useful for. So with that, I'm going to introduce George. George has this book, Advanced Analytics. I just picked this up a couple weeks ago. Been really enjoying it. And I'll let George talk a little bit about his book and his background. And I'm also going to bring Brett Stupakevich on the screen. Brett is our product marketing manager for Spotfire. But first, let's start with George. Do you want to say hello to our audience?
Yes, hello, Neil. I've got my prop here as well. Thank you for having me here. So my name is George Mount. I am with Stringfest Analytics. That's my own firm where I do analytics, training, and consulting. I hail from cold and gray Cleveland, Ohio. Doesn't always look so pretty as in the picture. And I am the author of Advancing into Analytics, which I think Neil described pretty well. I've got one more introductory slide here, which I'll let Neil advance to, which is I'm not a math geek, okay? I got a D in algebra in high school. And I have this on here because I think people think you need to be a math geek lifetime forever to get into analytics. That's not true. So if you're watching this, you're thinking, is analytics for me because I didn't like math in school? It might be. If you enjoy computers, improving businesses, things like that, there's a place in analytics for you. So I always just like to bring that up when I'm introducing myself. And that's, happy to be here.
Great. We're really happy to have you, George. And Brett is our product marketing manager for Spotfire. You might see him on LinkedIn and Twitter. He's very active with sharing some really cool Spotfire dashboards, including sports analytics. Brett, do you want to say a couple words to our audience? Introduce yourself.
Sure thing, Neil. Thanks. Long time, first time, as they say, probably, right? But, followed your program for years, of course. I'm the product marketing manager for Spotfire, but really happy to participate today and join in this conversation with George. And that totally validates me having a passion for analytics, George. Thank you very much with my math career. As a marketer by trade, it wasn't my natural inclination, but one that I've adopted over the years. So.
Yeah, analytics is, there's a lot of pieces to analytics, right? There's a lot of non-math pieces such as data models, data preparation. It's not all statistics and machine learning as some people might fear. But, those are some valuable tools. And we see a lot of upskilling in organizations now with individuals moving out of Excel into different platforms, different open source languages, R and Python, different tools, BI tools, data preparation tools. George, what you do a lot of work with clients, and your customers are all upskilling themselves. What are some of the challenges that you see for someone has no idea where to start and they're trying to get into analytics?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there are a couple ways to approach it, and we're going to try to cover both today. So there's more of the bottom up sort of approach, which is okay, I'm an individual data analyst. I want to improve my skills and contribute more to my organization. But it is a two-way street where top down, the organization, does need to provide the right tools, the right culture, right, the right processes for you to do well. So as far as personally, I think having that attitude where, well, I don't have to be a math genius to do well at this. I do have to not be afraid of technology, and I mean, I almost feel like there is a bit of a, I mean, phobia is kind of a loaded word with this idea of this irrational fear of things. Either I do see so many things on LinkedIn, and I think they're meant to be motivational about, you need to have good business skills and you need to have good communication skills, and that's certainly true. But those are often framed as, well, don't worry too much about the tools, right? It's not about the tools. I hate to break it to you, it kind of is, right? I mean, that's what separates man from beast, right? Is our use of tools. So, at an individual level, I think it is balancing that stack of approaches that we have to working with analytics. But it also is really, is your organization supporting you the way that it needs to? And that's everything. And I'm sure we'll get into it from, having machine readable data, having processes that data is, governed in some sense. I mean, this idea of data literacy, which we'll probably get to in a while, is pretty loaded in the sense that, I mean, would you call someone literate if they weren't able to like read pig Latin, right? Is that fair? It's not English, right? So if you give somebody data that's totally dirty and you have no like rules or reason for how to make sense of it, and you say that they're data literate or not data literate, that's not really fair. So at an organization level, having those processes, having the culture, so there really is, two senses of how to improve your data competencies. So there's a lot of different ways we could take all those approaches throughout this discussion. So hopefully we'll have some questions and chats and things like that as well to see what people are interested in.
Yeah, I also find that a lot of people can be thrown off by the terminology used in analytics, especially if you're going into higher level analytics like data science and machine learning. There's a lot of terminology that can be intimidating, but when you really sit down and just break down the concepts into what they are, they're pretty simple. In analytics, I mean, my background, for those of you that don't know in our audience, my background was a mechanical engineer, and so I didn't come from a data background per se. And I remember when I was starting to learn about joins and tables and how to manage multiple tables, and the concept was intimidating at first because I was like, what's a join? But then you realize, oh, it's just this Venn diagram. You got a left join, inner join, right join, outer join, and you broke down the concepts. It's really simple. And then same thing with Spotfire. One thing we see often is the use of the over function can be really useful. Windowing functions to actually aggregate data and represent data based on different conditions. That's an area where it can be intimidating at first, but when you break it down to just the simple concept, it's really not that hard, and it just takes a little bit of time and practice of building up these skills and knowing what do I need to achieve the task at hand, and what analytics tools, not what analytics processes is what I mean, are available to me to actually achieve the task at hand. I also find that analytics can be tough if you don't know where you're trying to go. I think for those that are in a organization with real business problems, they know what problems they're trying to solve, and then they know what data they have. They have point A, they have point B. They may not know how to go in between. If you're trying to learn analytics from scratch, it can be tough if you don't really formulate where you're trying to go with this. What should your data look like? What should your insights look like in a visualization dashboard? So problem formulation is the key to how you're going to figure out your path from point A to point B. Is there anything you want to add to that, Brett? Have you seen anything with organizations and tools?
I think I think of this excerpt that was a part of our, not in addition to George's long form book that you've both featured, we've also worked with George on an O'Reilly ebook, and I'd encourage you to have a look at that. Everyone listening to the discussion today, I'm going to read a really quick excerpt there. And George, you might remember this passage, maybe not. It's no coincidence that around the time big data emerged, so did the role of the data scientist. And compared with earlier roles like the researcher or statistician, the data scientist blends quantitative and domain expertise with a degree of computational thinking. And then that made me think about this blog that you published more recently, George, on the idea of, like Neil was saying, Python and R. R comes from like a real statistical heritage. Python, not so much, but like they actually think differently. So maybe you can expound a little bit upon that, because I know you get a question a lot of from, whether your workshops or clients, should I learn R or Python? And I mean, it's not really a binary choice these days, right? Like it's definitely more of it's not an either or.
Yeah. And I think that goes well. And I did post the link. If anybody's on LinkedIn, you can see the a link to that ebook. So this idea of these concepts maybe not being as complex as you think, and always thinking, well, how do I relate what I already know to what I am trying to learn, right? So when you're thinking about, and I guess it even goes to the Dr. Spotfire, well, the motto about we learn through questions and not answers. I think that's kind of the analytics motto as a whole, right? So, maybe you don't think of yourself as a data analyst, but, and I actually wrote a blog post about this a while back, trying to get in the mindset where you think like, oh, actually I have worked with a lot of data. So even if that's like, you put your budget together, that's data, right? Like you did your shift calendar, right? You decided who's going to be on shift what week or whatever. Like that's data too. There's a lot of management that goes into that. So trying to relate what you already know, what your questions are, etc. And then finally relating that to the tools that you're going to use, because that's another big relation. And we are in an age now where interoperability is really crucial to what we're doing, right? Like, think about 10, 15 years ago as a data analyst, everybody was basically in Excel, just kind of cobbling spreadsheets together. And that didn't necessarily sync up with like other programs. Now there's just like a huge suite of things that you can work with. And it really is about, how do I think of these as a team? How are these like all of my children, where, you don't have a favorite one, right? You just decide what's best for the task at hand. So there are a lot of considerations with that. But I think, again, it goes back to that mindset of like, okay, what are my questions? What do I already know? And, how can I relate like what I already know to the questions that I'm trying to ask? And then, use the best tools at my disposal to bridge that gap.
Yeah, and in different tools, going back to tools versus analytics process, analytics is a language, and regardless of what tool you're using, you're gonna do data transformation. You're probably gonna work with columnar relational databases. You're gonna use these different aspects of these tools to achieve your goal. Now, whether you're using Spotfire or Tableau or Power BI or whatever you have out there, you're still going to need to understand, like, how do I create a tidy data set? And so understanding those languages helps you kind of move between these tools, I think, differently. And those are also very present in R and Python as well. So understanding these concepts, I think are well, really their data literacy concepts are the foundation. And with that, I wanted to Brett, you looked like you wanted to say something to
Yeah, I just laugh because, you know, you look at the calendar and here we are the first week of December, right? It seems to be just like it's such a annual practice that we get into. I don't know if it's like a reflection or almost like as a look forward to as part of like our planning processes for our goals for next year. It's always this reflection of like evaluating how you did, maybe where there's room for improvement, right? As you sort of chart your future course. And, you know, it seems like the discussion, like you said, George, earlier about people, process, tools, it's data culture is a popular term. Like it's just gets tossed around so much in content this time of year. It's like an annual tradition in itself, other than the holidays, right? Like we just kind of get into these like, you know, evaluations of how do we do, also like prediction season or what's going to be hot next year. But I just think it's so funny because you can almost set your watch to it, right? It's like people talk about this stuff this time of year. And I'm just wondering, like in the changing set almost of like how analytics has become a team sport with more people who are engaged in analytics workflows than ever before, probably because like you said, George, like the full complement of everything that's at your disposal, but also like that quote pointed out from the O'Reilly ebook, the business domain expert, who's really almost like that, you know, you use the term citizen data scientist, but someone with a practical domain experience who's approaching it from that angle, as opposed to like being, you know, that the statistician who was groomed in R years ago or something like that, right? So where do you see the opportunities for like these citizen types in like the analytics team sport? Well, and this could be in small size organizations or large enterprises. What do you think?
Yeah, I think we're at a really good place for them. I've done a bit of Google Trends research myself about what's going on in the industry. And if you look at those trends, you'll see some things about you know, business intelligence as a topic has actually overtaken machine learning in interest, which totally sounds not intuitive, right? There's more search volume right now for like how to become a data analyst or like data analyst jobs, data analyst certificates versus data scientist jobs, data science certificates. Again, and that's still hard to believe because like your mom probably has heard of data scientists, like she doesn't care about what a data analyst is, you know? But I think as a whole, organizations, and whether this is because their data science models broke during the pandemic and they, you know, had to kind of change course about what analytics they were able to do. If all of their data scientists left because of the Great Resignation or because they couldn't pay them enough anymore. I mean, there are a lot of theories, but there is kind of in a way like an arbitrage opportunity for your typical subject matter expert, domain expert, to say, okay, what we've been doing hasn't worked fully. This idea that like a department of data geniuses can just take care of your data problems. We've tried that. It doesn't work. So what can we do differently? And I think it is like, okay, well, how can you get this person who is highly data literate, who understands like all the elements of the pipeline, whether that's like machine learning, descriptive analytics, visualizations, and they're able to kind of quarterback and coordinate all these things together and combine that with, you know, understanding the business as well. I think that's really where the value is going to be in the coming year. And I think that people have talked about this for a while, but I think now for a lot of reasons, if you're looking again at the data in terms of, right, like who's being hired and for what and what people are looking for, it seems to finally be coming true.
Yeah, I agree. I'm seeing you know, a lot of traction in that. And I remember this was probably 7-8 years ago when I was introducing Spotfire into my organization. And you know, before that we were using predominantly Excel, and people just wanted to do simple drill downs. And what we started to realize with, and this is a little bit of a plug for Spotfire, was with the integrated R engine, the Terra engine, we could do a lot more sophisticated calculations, and with automation, we could create data workflows. And at the time, the concept of that being self-service was very uncomfortable to our IT department, who was used to generating reports for the business without the domain experience. And the iteration cycles were just so numerous. There was so much back and forth to try to explain the domain knowledge. Not that there's not a place for that, there definitely is, but what we're seeing, what we're seeing now with data analysts, it's interesting because 10 years ago, a data analyst might use just Excel, but today a data analyst is using Python and R. What's the role itself is evolving, and you're seeing different business data analysts and manufacturing data analysts, logistics data analysts. You're seeing that actually blended into the domains. And that's kind of just the upskilling of general data literacy, I think, and the value these tools are delivered. I think you're right. It is a good time because organizations don't have to be sold as much on the potential of analytics and data science as much as they used to. Like 10 years ago when I was getting started in this space, the concept of machine learning and AI was, it was right up there with like crypto, right? It was like, is this just hype? Is this just buzzwords? And now we're actually seeing things like Chat GPT, which we were just talking about before this session started, and people are realizing, or Lenza, or Prisma, or these different AI only applications.
Yeah.
We're
Definitely, Neil. One thing I want to add to that, like I think it's helpful that technology has sort of paved the road for doing analytics better, right? Where it's like you just said, the challenges you ran into in almost like what they used to call the Wild West of self-service BI years ago, right? But I think that governance has improved so much. And it's like, I think we can do that, especially at an enterprise level, with more confidence now. And I know that governance is a key topic in what you talk about, George, with a lot of your clients.
Yeah, definitely. It does go back to that. Again, going to the typical Excel user and the way that their data was stored was in Excel, engineered for humans to work with, right? And I think that now there's finally a shift where, okay, well, the computer needs to read this too, right? So having these standards where the data becomes machine readable, that there does definitely need to be a human element of that, right? In terms of the culture and what's being collected for what reason and things like that, and coming together with those standards of data collection and things like that. But yeah, that it is a very important topic. It's not the most exciting one, right, to undertake, but it does have a big impact. So I think that's something else that when we think about these domain embedded citizen data analysts or data scientists, that kind of making that governance strategy and that culture kind of diffuse among the organization is something that can help as a whole keep the organization's data running smoothly, and also not burn any one single person out with having to be the keeper of all the keys there.
Right. Yeah. Right. And what do you say to individuals that are trying to they realize the value of analytics, but they're trying to sell that vision to their team or their business? How do you advise that they get started with delivering that value or gaining buy-in across the organization?
Yeah. I think we are at a time right now where there's a lot of personnel change, people leaving, people getting laid off, all these things are happening. And again, if you can connect that reality with the reality of we are in a data driven economy, right? Whether that is putting reports and analyses together more quickly, more accurately. I mean, really giving some sense of urgency to a change in mindset of how data is used. I think that, looking at some of these AI driven insights, and it doesn't have to be like, oh, a predictive model to tell us our business plan for the next 10 years. Even something is like, oh, hey, I want to see sales by region, right? Think of how long that used to take. We can do it now really quickly. But that still does require our data to be in a certain format so that the computer can read it and then give us those answers. So seeing that, like, okay, well, this stuff is possible. This isn't just like a magic fairy tale, but it does take a little bit of, boring effort, right? I think there's definitely still an association. And I think that, I don't know if all the chat GPTs and Prismas of the world are helping with that AI is just kind of this like magic thing, right? And there's really no way to understand how it works. To an extent, that's true, but we know one thing that it needs to work is like good data. So, yeah, that I think is something that regular analysts can make an impact on in the coming years.
A philosophy that I've really become a fan of is the PLG, product-led growth strategy. And this is really geared towards more of SaaS organizations, software as a service organizations, on how to ramp up and scale adoption and revenue in a viral manner. But what you are doing as a data analyst is you are making a data product. And one of the principles of product-led growth is to get to that aha moment quickly. So I recommend small, quick wins. If you can, you don't have to solve the company's biggest problems, but if you can start to deliver repetitive value, even at a granular level for even just your immediate team, you'll start to gain people's trust. They'll see that what you're creating is different and new, and usually saves a lot of time in what people are already doing. And everyone loves it when you save them time. No one wants to be in Excel copy and pasting between sheet to sheet and saving, final revision to final of their different Excel documents. And so when you start to actually deliver these analytics products. And I think also data visualization is a key to that, because it's a language for communicating your data. So, and your data insights. So I recommend using data visualization where you can. Now, it's going to be easier if you're using a tool like Spotfire, where you can just drag and drop charts. But if you don't have that type of buy-in with your organization, there's lots of open source tools. There's Plotly Dash, and there's Shiny apps. There's lots of different open source tools that you can use. They're going to be a little bit harder because they require you to code, but it's not going to be time wasted, because learning those skills are going to be very valuable to you. So I think that that is, small, quick wins is how you start to gain adoption. And, data literacy as a program, I wanted to actually come to one of your slides here, George, on data literacy. Let me share this here. Can you talk a little bit about how data literacy programs work within organizations, and how you can quantify the success of these as you get past those short, quick wins? You've started to convince people around you. Now you're trying to make a broader functional change within your organization. Can you talk a little bit about this slide that you have?
Yeah, I did not develop this. I'm not that intelligent. But yeah, no. So the idea here with these data literacy programs is across the organization, how can we help every individual work with data, read it, understand it, communicate it with it more effectively. So, one thing that generally is going to work better is putting it aside as something that it's more than just, compliance mandatory training. Like, this is not just don't smoke at your desk or you're fired, right? This is like, we want to help you. And I think that to really be a good data literacy program, understanding like the societal implications at play. So, not only are you going to be a better employee, you'll be a better citizen, you'll be a better consumer, because you're going to understand like, well, what happens when I sign up for this app? Like, what's happening with my data, right? These are important questions. So when we're doing this data literacy program, we want to set this up so that we'll find, like, again, you mentioned having these quick wins. There at any organization, involving these subject matter experts who have identified that there's a problem, right? It's any transformation plan, right? The first step is admitting you have the problem. So, finding those people who have already expressed it, maybe they don't know what the, path forward is, but they're willing to, go for it. Getting that, you do need the executive sponsor, right? Because otherwise, right, it's just like any organization, you need resources to do it, right?
Yeah.
So you're going to have to do that. But you also, again, it's got to be like top down and bottom up. So, so you work on that, you have your quick wins, and, evaluation can be a lot of different things. I think that one thing that, studying this and being pretty active in this market right now, a big thing right now is, individual competency frameworks and matrices and things like that. So, for a while, like we've mentioned, data scientist was all the rage, right? Everybody wanted to be a data scientist. Everybody thought hiring one was just going to solve all your problems. And now finally, it seems that the jury's out. It's like, that's not the full picture, right? So now places are like, okay, well, what are all the different roles that we need? What do they do? How do they progress over time? And, I'm thinking data specific roles in general, but even, think of how many professional roles these days are not touched by data and do not need some kind of data driven competencies, right? So a lot of it, as these data literacy programs, I think, mature, are thinking a lot in terms of like the professional competencies and the capabilities that are needed, again, at that individual level, but then, how do those kind of roll up into a whole and help us do what we need to with our culture?
Yeah, definitely. And data literacy, I think programs are great. They help upskill across the adoption spectrum. And when I talk about the adoption spectrum, you have early adopters, which are going to go out there and learn new things. And then you have laggards that are going to kind of wait till maybe other people try it and they take a little bit longer to be convinced. But when you upskill with the data literacy program, you're able to bring everyone up at somewhat the same pace. So programs are good, but there's also individual, there's things that individual can do to educate themselves. And we have a great data literacy article on the TIBCO community. And the data literacy article talks about things such as different data types. And this is when I talk about the language of analytics. You have, different variable types, different data types such as continuous, categorical, geospatial, ordinal, graph data. You have different processes for statistical analysis. You have different types of binning. So this is like a one-page community article. Maybe you could maybe call it like two or 3 pages. You consider the scrolling, but the concepts are very simple and clear. And just reading that data literacy article and passing that around your organization is going to improve the value you can deliver, because now more people are able to understand the results of the analytics that you're creating. And then you have a slide here, George, on data education, raising the bar of data literacy at Airbnb. Did you want to talk a little bit about how this was done?
Sure. Yeah. I just had I had included this as another very practical framework for what data literacy really is, because again, it is it is training, but it's not just training, right? Whether you think about, okay, I know that some organizations are putting together things like capability academies. Maybe they are standing up boot camps for their new hires. I mean, there are a lot of different ways, and I think that, that's in line with education as a whole, right? Where everybody's got to constantly be learning new things. People aren't staying in the same careers as long. Things don't stay. Things get obsolete more quickly. So just having that continuous education is a thing now. But there are other elements to this as well, right? Which, the tools are a factor, right? I know Brett and I have bantered on this quite a few times about like not understanding the problem versus the tools or whatever, and how that's kind of a false dichotomy. So there is an element to that as well. And again, we've kind of talked about how, the philosophies underlying your tools do have a very real impact on, how they approach different problems that you're solving. And then like data access and governance, that's definitely still a thing. I think that again, in the past, and I think this is very much in the kind of like early days of big data, this idea that just like, okay, let's open up the floodgates and collect all the data that we want and like go for it, right? Like, and bring in a data scientist and they'll figure it out, right? They've got all this data, they'll do it. Being a little more prescriptive about like who needs what kind of data at what time, like in what kind of format, and giving it to them in a way that they can really do something with it well. So I think that all those elements go together. I think that, in the future, you're going to see all of those things blending together even more and more, where, not only are you going to give people the right tools and the right data, but you'll also give them the right, educational resources, right? Served with that data, with the tool, building different opportunities for them. I think this idea of, the community of practice, I think it has come up a time or two already, but, I think we are finally getting to a point as data professionals and just professionals in general that like, kind of hoarding your knowledge and making your processes intentionally opaque, right? So you stay in business is not a good idea anymore, right? So being a lot more, hey, I'm a professional, and as a professional, I'm in a community, and that means that I need to openly give and receive knowledge. Is definitely going to be a big part of like a data literate organization.
Right. And I think a lot of people, this is kind of going back to the upskilling discussion. They say, when am I supposed to learn all this stuff? I have a day job, right? So what advice do you have for people that don't have data analytics as part of their role, but are trying to bring data analytics into the
It's a really good question.
Organization?
Yeah. I think it is looking at, again, admitting where you have a problem in your current tools and processes, right? What can be improved? Just being honest with how much time things are taking you. And I think in a way it really is just that kind of cost benefit kind of well, how much time will it take to learn X versus how much am I going to get out of it from saving? Again, that's fine. Like, not everybody needs to learn deep learning models in Python or something like that. And I think any good data literacy program won't make that claim, right? That everybody needs Python or something like that. But yeah, helping, and again, it does take some cultural shift. Ideally, you're going to be in a place where you learning those things will be part and parcel with like disseminating that knowledge and kind of helping everybody's role. So it's not seen as, oh, he's wasting time by like taking an hour out of the day to learn something new. It's more like, oh, he's going to learn something new, and that's going to make his job easier, but it's also going to make my job easier, right? So there really is like a shift in mindset that you need to it as well. It's not just like a cold hard, right, cost benefit calculation.
Yeah, like value in the R&D side, right? So like there needs to be that time for identifying future problems. Your business is changing, right? So it's, the idea of going to a dashboard with a couple predefined queries of these, business metrics. Okay, that serves its purpose. But I think what Neil was describing earlier about that exploratory element of, exploratory applications to ask questions of it and interact with it to do a little bit of more iterative learning for your business in kind of blending all the topics you guys have discussed, where agile process, identify the problem. That is, it doesn't happen in a static way. So I feel like the exploratory mindset, obviously everyone here knows the role that data viz plays in that. And Neil, maybe this is a good one for you, because I know you use data viz not only as a means for presenting results, but as a means of really your discovery process, right? And I think a lot of our users do too. Like, so the role of data viz in a data science workflow. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, data visualization is not just reports. It's, again, a language and how you communicate with your data. Tables of data are easily machine readable, but difficult for a human to perceive. So visual encodings, position, size, scale, shape, color, those are what the human eye understands. And when you can explore your data, you can find those little nuggets of, you're mining it, and you're finding nuggets of information that were previously unseen. When you're just going from a standard process of, let me just copy this Excel data to this other data, et cetera. But another thing I wanted to say in terms of, hey, I feel overwhelmed, I can't learn all these things. My organization may not understand these things, or my organization understands some of it, but not all of it. I've had really good success crafting my own roles. I did it in my previous organization as a mechanical engineer, creating an engineering analytics team and initiative, and I've done some things at TIPCO as well. And some of the ways that I found in TIPCO, it hasn't all been even analytics focused and where I've been able to craft my own role. It's been, a lot of it is Dr. Spotfire and just reaching out to you guys. And essentially what I'm getting at here is, how do you see value? Your organization may not see value, or you may not be given the time to it. How do you create that time for it? Well, there's a couple principles. One is, if you're educating yourself and you don't know anything about analytics, and you want to do analytics, you're really not going to be able to go to most of your managers out there and say, hey, I want you to clear my schedule because I want to go learn data analytics. That education has to be done on your own time. But when you feel comfortable with your skill sets, that you can deliver the value in your organization, that's when you use the next principle I like to use, which is ask for forgiveness and not permission, where you start to carve out some of your own time to create that analytics value or that business value. Maybe it's creating YouTube videos for Spotfire, or it's creating a dashboard for your supply chain manager. You start to carve out some time to do this in addition to your work, and then you go for that small quick win. So, okay, I showed my manager something that was useful in terms of analytics. I showed, we were losing revenue in this certain area. They're able to take that to their manager. They're now talking about that at a strategic level. That strategic change is going to trickle down to tactical changes. And then I'm going to deliver, in a week or two, I'm going to deliver another insight. And in a week or two, I'm going to deliver another insight. And it doesn't take very long before your manager starts to say, hey, this person is delivering more value than copying Excel spreadsheets from back and forth, or entering data into a CRM or whatever. We should give them more time to do this. And it takes a few weeks, it takes a few months, but after delivering continuous value, people begin to trust you, and your role can totally change to the point where now that time you're spending educating yourself outside of your role, you can actually use some of your work time to educate yourself, because people know that you're spending your time effectively and what you're going to do delivers value. So that's my recommendation for those that feel overwhelmed with, like, I can't learn all this stuff. The other thing is, don't try to learn everything all at once. There is a lot out there in terms of learning relational databases, learning data visualization, learning data transformation. Focus on the problems that you have and just solving like really small problems that are immediate, and then also focus on your interests. If you're saying to yourself, hey, I really like this ETL side of things, I really like pulling the data together, I don't really like the visualization side, well, then focus on that and you're going to find yourself doing really well at the things that you're interested in. So start small, start with the problems that you're already faced, and then you'll kind of grow from there. It's treat it as a hobby, is another thing. Just treat it as a hobby rather than overwhelming yourself with there's all these people on Twitter talking about building AI platforms, and I'm just learning what a SQL join is and how am I ever going to do this, so yeah, I don't know if you wanted to add to that, George. Or you looked like you had something to say there.
Yeah, I think you're definitely right. This idea of, well, what you're doing already probably involves data. So how can you build on that, right? And being a little more attuned to what data really is, right? Which is, just any fact or observation, used for analysis or discussion. I forget what the exact definition is, but yeah, thinking about, where's the data that you're currently using? How can you, move up the ladder of analysis with it? And I mean, that's really what data literacy is. I mean, we think about all these different definitions of literacy, but I think one is really just like the personal satisfaction element of it, right? Like, when do we say that a child is literate? It's when they're reading for fun and they're reading to, kind of like make sense of the world and communicate with others. And I think that we can say the same with data literacy, right? Like, you're data literate at the point where you're not afraid of data anymore and you are enjoying learning more and doing things with it. So that's really how you get data literate, is just by enjoying it.
Yeah, and I also think another aspect to talk about here in learning and upskilling is the augmented nature of these tools. These tools are becoming more and more augmented over time. And there's a certain balance between having full agency in the analytics you're creating versus having something automatically generated. Let me bring up a slide here. So Spotfire has, for instance, Spotfire has augmented data visualization capabilities where there's a recommender system that will start to look at what type of data, what is your data structured like, and you make the decisions on what do you want to communicate, comparison, distribution, composition, relationship. And there's this whole process that used to be very manual for BI tools and data visualization tools, which is, how do you choose the right chart? Do you have univariate data? Do you have bivariate data, multivariate data? Are you doing continuous versus continuous variables? Are you doing continuous versus categorical? Is this exploratory? Is this explanatory? Now the recommendation engine just does this for you. And the recommendation engine, let me see if I can, I'm really bad with PowerPoint, surprisingly. There we go. The recommendation engine actually takes in those considerations and starts recommending visualizations for you. Now you have the agency to make the fine-grained control, but you don't have to do all of the decision making for what type of chart should I use. A lot of that's done for you and ranked for you, giving you some. It's ranked for you, giving you some agency, but it's done automatically for you, giving you that augmentation. And we're going to see more and more augmentation in these tools. I think NLG, natural language generation, we had recently ARIA NLG on our Dr. Spotfire session, which showed how different text can be generated for explaining dashboards, explaining insights. That's augmenting the user's ability. So the consumer's ability. So the consumer doesn't necessarily need to be upskilled as much with data literacy to understand the insights from your dashboard. That can be generated in text and explained to them as if you were in the room, and help guide them in that way. So
Yeah, without a doubt, Neil, like the amount that's been productized with the convergence really of like baking ML into analytics platforms, and the amount that we're able to now surface up for decision makers. It doesn't even start again with that thought of like a predefined query. It's like it's complementing the decision maker with this alternative of things to consider. And in that way, I think like the recommendations engine, for instance, is a really good like menu builder of here are your top options, right? And then in that way, I think it's going to be a great coworker for people moving forward.
right. Absolutely. And again, this is only increasing in tools. The gap between automation and manual data analytics is closing, but the human in the loop is still very important for making the important decisions and deciding how that data is best represented. I just wanted to bring up on the screen. So Divya asked if we could share the link for the Spotfire data literacy page. Now, I did put that in the LinkedIn. I put that in the LinkedIn chat. It may not be showing up, but what you can do is, if it's not showing up in the LinkedIn chat, is you can just go to the TIBCO community and search data literacy, and it'll come up for you right there. And then just another question. Any pointers that can be shared when trying to implement Python environments within Spotfire, specifically the geoscience, geophysics to view waveforms? So I haven't used OBSPy. I haven't used that before, but Spotfire does have an integrated Python and R engine in it. And this is actually a really good point when we're talking about the blending of different roles. The platform itself allows you as a statistician, data scientist, subject matter expert to develop your R or Python scripts and then integrate that within your dashboard and your visual discovery, or really make a visual analytics app. So I recommend if you're trying to get started in that, look into Spotfire data functions. Data functions are the Spotfire term for using Python, R, and other extensible frameworks within Spotfire. And Spotfire does ship with a Python and R interpreter and connection to open source repositories like CRAN and PyPy, where different packages like OBSPy can be downloaded and installed. Let's see. So what do you, let's maybe close up with, we haven't talked too much about ML. When we're going into, when I was just talking about augmented data consumption, how the business user maybe who's not totally data literate, how they're going to get value out of your dashboard. We talked about NLG, natural language generation. There's also NLQ, which is natural language query, where you can ask questions of your data and get generated responses. How do you feel about the trends, George, of model explainability and model explainability and ML explainability?
Yeah, I think that's another one where in the past, this paradigm of, well, let's just collect as much data as possible. We'll have some data scientists kind of in the back office build these models. And, it wasn't that much different than the olden days of the statistician running regressions in the basement, right? It was still very back office, not real transparent to anybody. And I think that the pandemic was a big factor where, an e-commerce model, right? Oh, wait, we don't have inventory. What does the model do now? Or what's the model gonna do if there's no inventory? I don't know, break, I guess. So we definitely got to a point where people thought like, well, wow, okay, we need to be a little more ahead of what our models are going to be doing in terms of auditing, in terms of being able to release them. Again, going to this idea of our citizen analysts and scientists, giving them access to those tools in production, but also making it really easy for others to, update, train, interpret those tools. So I think that that's definitely another big influence of what's coming in the future for analytics.
Yeah, I think going from these black box models and predictions into something that is someone can reason themselves through, like they can see why was an insurance quote rejected or accepted by the system, why was something considered fraud, and they can actually reason through how the model made those decisions, gains trust in the model. And I mean, the first thing people are going to do when they're presented with an insight is to challenge that insight, and they're going to challenge it from their own domain knowledge of what the shortcomings are, or what the they're going to challenge it from their own domain knowledge and test it first.
And I think another key thing there too, Neil, is the regulatory landscape in general is now going to require that. It's not just the right thing to do, it's something you need to do. And you need to have an analytics platform that can complement you on that story to the explainability.
That's right. Yep, it's very true. Well, all really good points. This was a great discussion. I think we can wrap it up here. Thank you all for joining the session. Thank you, George and Brett, for joining us on this discussion on advancing in analytics. Again, just want to plug George's book here. It's a great pickup for Christmas, in the holidays, if you're looking for a little gift. It's a really practical read. I just wanted to say a few words about what I enjoyed about this book. It's a very practical read, starting from if you know absolutely nothing. This book comes with exercises. It comes with data that you can download. There's links to the data you can download. It'll show you how to do certain analyses in Excel, how to organize your data in Excel. They'll show you how to do the same things in R and the same things in Python. It talks about Jupyter Notebooks. It talks about RStudio. So very practical, very hands-on book. If you're an aspiring data analyst and just getting started, or if you have been going for a while and want to strengthen your skills, this is a good pickup. Anything you'd like to add to that, George?
It covers a lot of ground in 215 pages or so.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you all again for joining, and we will catch you next month. We're going to get started right in the first week of the new year with our next Dr. Spotfire session. I think we're going to be talking about our JavaScript hub. That is something Jose has been putting together, and it's still tentative. It's in the works, but keep an eye out. The first Tuesday of each month at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern is when we host Dr. Spotfire, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks, guys.
This is awesome. Thanks, Neil. Thanks, George.